Hello, friends. Welcome back. We are in episode 2 of our foundation tutorial series for ZOAPIIO.com. In the last episode, we did a brief overview of the application that we want to build, which is a taxi booking service. And so let's get started. And the first thing we're going to build is the mid office. Typically, when you are building an application in ZOAPIIO, if you have the need for a large database or an admin application, that is where you will start. And the reason, and this is also the simplest, you may find that surprising because an admin application can be quite involved. But the way ZOAPIIO leverages code generation, and we'll see it in a minute, is that building the mid office is actually a breeze. So we log into the IDE and we launch this wizard. What the ZOAPIIO wizard will do is it will generate the entire application for us. And how it's going to do it is on the basis of a configuration that we're going to provide. This little window that you see here, it contains a generic configuration, just so that if you're building it for the first time, you have an idea as to what it looks like. There is plenty of documentation available. So we will start by analyzing this very configuration using an online editor. So this is the configuration that came by default, in the sense it generates a very trivial application, but really the idea is for you to use this as a template to write your own configuration. This is a JSON file, and it describes your application, right? It says right on the top itself. Then you give it a name, a small, short, simple name, a title. Themes are UI themes. The one I showed you in the last episode was the dark theme, but there's also a light theme if that's the one you prefer. And you can configure these themes. So there are only two themes, and you can disable one if you want by deleting it from here. What are the roles that your application is going to have? We have some generic roles, and the rules are used in determining access to what parts of the application are accessible to which users. Then you define your entities. So entities are really the database tables and how they will behave when you open them in the application. Okay, so it's a data storage come data presentation format. So you have a name, a label, you give it a menu, you give it an icon, you give the menu an icon, and you say what type of data it is. Like we discussed, that three tables, the setting, the user, and the user group, they're mandatory because the system needs these to manage your users. I mean, that's the minimum. When you create an application, they're going to be users and they're going to be teams. And so this one has no properties. Let's come to the second entity. It's got the same details. Access and classification I will leave for the time being, but maybe you can come back to it later, or you can read the documentation. They're basically also to do with how the access to the entity is controlled. Then these properties are really the columns in that entity or the fields that you will be working with. So this is also quite, if you just see it, you can probably intuitively guess what everything is. Some things I will point out. For example, some fields have two names separated by a comma. And the reason for that is that there is a support for complex fields which actually require more than one column to store in the table. In our case, like country, the data type is country. It needs to have two columns, one for the code and one for the name. Similarly, you will come across other fields, like for example, there is a decimal range data type, and you can give two. You need to give two columns. Okay, so this is just. I will also maybe mention here a little bit about the customization. The application you will get out of generating from this configuration is a, so to say, a basic application. It allows you to manage the data, import the data, play with it, do the search, slicing, dicing, reporting, all that you can do. But in any application like in ours, we have an operation called the cancel booking. Okay, so some sort of code or some sort of additional programming has to be provided to manage that. So here we have these help files, scripts, handlers, custom pages, uh, dashboard widgets that we can provide. So these require programming. I mean, if you plan to customize the application, we will have to actually write JavaScript files, more ZOAPIIO programming, and HTML, and even SQL. If you're doing widgets, you will need to write SQL. But this is, of course, you can build gradually. You can start with the application and then add customization as you go along. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this whole thing, erase it, and replace it with the configuration that I have for our mid office. So let's see here. So in terms of entities, the first entity we have is the booking. That's the obvious one that we already aware. We're going to put it in a menu by the name mid office. Then we have the properties. So there is a booking ID which is provided to us by the supplier, the booking date, the booking status. There is a booking ID that we may need to. You can just ignore these two fields because they also deal with integration with other applications in our travel portal. Then we capture the vehicle make, model, and number, and we're capturing them as one property. The reason is that because we would like all these three values to appear in one row in our application. So we give the type as multiple, and we provide separate labels for each of them and separate data types for each of them. This is a shortcut way of saying that these are three different columns, but I want them to be handled as one as far as the UI is concerned. Similarly, there are other things. We can, none of these have validation. Some of them have validation called required, which means this value must be provided. Then we give it a menu icon. We give it an icon so that when it appears on the UI, it looks a little more easy to identify. Then we come to this section called the children. So this children section defines the child entities. Like we discussed, there's a payment and there's an amendment. Each of these child entities have their own properties, just like the entity we're building have properties. Um, okay, I'll maybe draw an attention here to this type, which is a select property. So here we can give a select or easy select followed by a list of values that we want this field to have. So this just to give you an idea as to how this configuration contains formatting as well as storage attributes. Then we have the setting table, we have the user table, user group table, and B2C, which is our subscriber table. Right? And we have chosen not to give any properties to them because really at this point, whatever comes by default is good enough for us. But we can, of course, add more properties as we go forward. Another thing is, once we use this configuration and build our application, we can anytime come back, change it, and build our application again. It is completely safe and actually recommended that you build your application in increments. And when you rebuild using the edited configuration, the system will make sure that the data that you have created in your application is not disturbed. So if you're adding a property, this will result in a new column getting added without disturbing what you already have. Of course, if you delete a property, then that column would be deleted, and then you would lose it forever. But here saying that this is not something that you need to get it right in the first shot. You write something, you build, you see how it's working, come back, modify it, and that's how you build your application. So this is it. This is going to be our code for now, and we will get the entire application built from here. Now we will, towards the end of this foundation course, we'll come back and build the customization, which is for handling of the cancellation function, which requires us to do programming. So for now, everything else is standard, which we are happy with, and that function we will come back and add later. So let's now we just copy, come back here, and we do the, and we paste it here. So now this is one way of editing your configuration, which is using the text editor or online editor. There's another way we can use, which is the visual editor. I'll walk you through this a little bit, and if you feel comfortable with this, you can use this. This is for like really beginners who, but the recommended method is that you use the text editor. So here it allows you to do a, you can change your configuration using a completely guided editor. It looks a little complex because as you drill down and go deeper and deeper, it kind of becomes slightly confusing, but it takes a little bit of getting used to, and then you can start using it. So if you want to add a property, just you can add it from here. Go to add a property here, and then you can type in the values and save. So here, this also gives you a little prompted help. It's easier in the sense you know what value to type, it knows what structure to create, and it's a guided editor. And you can use this. You should definitely give it a try and see if it is useful. So now we have this configuration, and now we go to just click on continue, and this is going to create all the tables, all the APIs, all the everything that's required to actually work with this application. Finally, the last thing is we do a deploy. Anytime we build an application, we make a change, we have to deploy, which means save it on the server. And the moment you save it on the server, it is immediately available for you to start using it. So now we saw the mid-office application in last episode, but we will just sort of run through it again. And so it is based on what we had described, all the menu icons, all the structures, properties. Remember, for the vehicle, we had created a complex property called make, model, and number. So they are all appearing in one row. Similarly, driver ID rating. And these are the columns for the payment. From here, we can search, add, create, all that we can do manually. So this is our mid-office application, and it's already built. It didn't take us anything except just understanding the configuration structure, which is once you've done it, then you don't need to come back and refer to the documentation again. The only few things you need to remember. Anytime you write a new application, just simply open the configuration, type in your entity details, some environmental details, and you're done. Your application is there. So really, this mid-office, all it's missing is the functionality to manage the cancellation process, which we're going to come back and do towards the end. So this is your mid office is, I would say, 80 to 90% complete with absolutely no coding at all, right? And we just waved a wand, invoked the wizard, and we got this application. So this is the most powerful part of the ZOAPIIO, which is the wizard, and it takes care of your admin application almost right away. So, in the next episode, I'm going to start building the integrations and the front end app. So, I'll see you in the next episode.